Well, this is going to be a massive video. I've put a lot of work into editing this, and I'm also recording this while I'm sick. So if you want to help the channel with YouTube's algorithm, I'm just asking my regular viewers to leave a like and comment on this video. It really does push my stuff to new viewers, and it helps a ton. Today, we're tackling the results of the community ranking poll for the Silksong Boss difficulty. I asked my viewers to rank each boss in Silksong on a difficulty scale of 1 to 10, 1 being easiest, 10 being hardest, then some hashtag mathematics gets us our average scores. Be sure to let me know if you enjoy this format, as if you do, I could consider going back to Hollow Knight to do a boss difficulty ranking of the original Team Cherry title. Maybe if we get, 800 likes? I'm Billy S, and these are the Silksong bosses ranked easiest to hardest by you, my viewers. At number 47, we have Moss Mother, who scored a total difficulty average of 1.41 out of 10, with 258 votes for easiest boss. She's the first boss you fight in the game with a fairly trite health pool and a moveset that is designed to be abused by Hornet's movement tech. The diagonal nail pogo works wonders when you have a flying moss creature swinging towards you, and her other ability to bash the ceiling is more of a passive attack. It either drops boulders you need to avoid or moss grubs you need to kill. You have a bench right outside the boss room, so dying doesn't feel punishing, and once you beat the Moss Mother, you'll feel like you understand Hornet's basic moveset. If Moss Mother is easy to players when they're unfamiliar with the game on a first playthrough, imagine how easy it must make her on a repeat run when you're far more comfortable with Hornet's playstyle. At number 46, we have Garmond and Zaza, who scored a total difficulty average of 1.86 out of 10, with 109 votes for easiest boss. This is an optional encounter in the hidden upper area of the Whispering Vaults, which can only be done prior to the High Hall's Gauntlet. Here, Garmond and Zaza will challenge you to a duel, and bless his soul, Garmond is woefully inept at fighting someone as skilled in combat as Hornet. He rides Zaza into battle with reckless abandon, jousting to hit you with his lance as best he can. They'll jump in the air to try and spear you from above, giving you ample time to walk out of the way of their trajectory, with the only semi-dangerous move being his upper swipe due to its wide hitbox. Garmond and Zaza were so poor in their strategy that they picked an arena that they could be knocked off of onto spikes, doing extra damage. This is a Moss Mother level difficulty fight that takes place near the midpoint of Act 2, and that is what exacerbates the lack of difficulty here. Hell, I'd personally put them below Moss Mother as the easiest boss in the game, but it's such a minor nitpick. At number 45, we have Voltverm, who scored a total difficulty average of 2.07 out of 10, with 154 votes for easiest boss. Voltverm mainly beats out our previous entry because they had far more votes in the 2 to 3 range, whereas Garmond and Zaza's votes cumulated more in the 1 and 2 range. Voltverm can be fought in Act 2 if you do some specific platforming to reach the Vault Nest, or you can use the Silk Saw in Act 3. Either way, Voltverm is not a threatening fight. It pokes out of the ceiling of its cavern, creating various electrical patterns that you have to avoid while taking pot shots at the boss. It won't attack you directly, and the only danger comes from how some of the column attack patterns are good at faking out the player, but if you play things safe, you shouldn't be taking a ton of damage here, especially in Act 3, because the amount of tougher bosses you went through to get to this point says it all. Voltverm's difficulty is cute, that's the best way to put it. Dodge some lightning, hit the verm, and claim your prize. At number 44, we have the Skull Tyrant rematch in Bone Bottom, who scored a total difficulty average of 2.3 out of 10, with 88 votes for easiest boss. The biggest sense of challenge that comes from this fight is the initial surprise as it comes charging through Bone Bottom, destroying your bench and forcing you into a fight you might not be ready for. Once you're up and at 'em, the arena is so open and vast that a majority of the Skull Tyrant's attacks feel neutered in difficulty. It's easy to jump over him with all that space above you, and there are less rocks dropping down whenever he attempts to pull off his tantrum attack. Not to mention, you've already beaten this boss once before in a slightly tougher arena, so you already know the tips and tricks on what to do and what not to do. You're not going to be hitting the skull for damage, as you know that doesn't hurt the boss. And with such a simple back and forth style movement pattern, the second Skull Tyrant goes down in no time. At number 43, we have the Skull Tyrant First Fight, who scored a total difficulty average of 2.57 out of 10, with 93 votes for easiest boss. Take our previous entry, copy-paste it, but lower the ceiling of the arena so it's an actual cave, and have a few extra boulders dropping down during the tantrum move, and that's Skull Tyrant won. The most threatening moments in this fight come if you scroll the boss off screen, as you have no idea what it's up to when you can't see it, and if you accidentally corner yourself in the right side of the arena, you might struggle to find your way out. That, and fighting Skull Tyrant on a fresh playthrough, it's possible to die while you get the hang of his weak spots and openings, but on repeat runs, I think we all agree that dying to him just isn't on the cards. At number 42, we have Plasmified Zango, who scored a total difficulty average of 2.61 out of 10, with 103 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. An optional Act 3 encounter, you're supposed to find Zango while doing the wish for Xylitol, and using the tool given, you can extract the plasmium from Zango up to 5 times to kill him. I found this method insanely difficult, personally, as the charge-up time for the tool never lined up right with the speed of the injured Zango. I think it's easier to just hug the boss and whack him with a fully upgraded nail until he starts crawling on the floor like a Silent Hill monster. His erratic movements make him extremely frustrating to deal with, and you all agree, as I also got my viewers to vote for their favourite and least favourite fights in the game as well. They had a list of every boss in the game and were told to pick 5 for each category, and Plasmified Zango, with 171 votes, is considered the worst boss in the game by my viewers. Barely a boss fight, or a chore. At number 41, we have the fourth chorus, who scored a total difficulty average of 2.84 out of 10, with 74 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. To an extent, I understand this entry, as a part of me is actively struggling to think of other bosses that could land below this fight, maybe Pale Stag or the first Great Conch Flies. And yet with how cinematic and exciting fourth chorus is as a boss, it just feels wrong to see it down here. But the fourth chorus has insanely well telegraphed attacks that feel buttery smooth to avoid, and it's very easy to trap the boss in a pattern. Have him destroy only the platforms you need him to, avoid his swipes and dodge the rocks coming down from above. He even has an instant win condition during the last portion of the fight where you can drop a giant explosive rock on the mech to blow him beneath the lava. None of the other fights in the game have that sort of mechanic. On the plus side though, not a single person gave the fourth chorus a vote for worst fight, and that puts him on a high pedestal with fights like Widow, First Sinner, the first 2 Lace fights, Phantom, you get the picture. People are positive on fourth chorus, ease be damned. I bet an ascended variant would go hard though. At number 40, we have the Moss Mother duo, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.22 out of 10, with 74 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. How'd you make the first boss of the game more difficult? Plop in a second one, independent of the first, and try to deal with their patterns at the same time, of course. And you know what? It actually does work, making the Moss Mothers a tad bit more threatening as a result. More boulders raining down, more moss grubs to fight, more swoops to pogo over, and if you come here in Act 3, there's a chance they get black threaded, which only serves to make them even stronger, while granting them void attacks is a nice little cherry on top. I wouldn't willingly do that to myself, killing them in Act 2 is just a more efficient use of my time, but I also like that you can tailor your experience of the fight based on when you choose to go after them. It's player freedom, and in a Metroidvania, that is always a good thing. At number 39, we have the Bell Beast, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.27 out of 10, with 72 votes for easiest boss and 4 votes for hardest boss. The obvious elephant in the room is that being the second boss means that the Bell Beast can't be too hard for the player, otherwise everyone just gets stuck in the marrow with no means to progress. But that doesn't mean our queen is a pushover. The Bell Beast's 2 main attacks, the scuttle along the floor and the jump into the air, are tough to predict on a first run, and you have to really be patient as you wait to see exactly what's coming your way so you can react to it. I've definitely had my fair share of contact damage by backing into a corner, only to get jumped on and stomped. Then you add the bells into the mix, which rain down from the ceiling and bounce around, and you've got a lot of moving parts that need to be checked. Speedrunners have since discovered ways to defeat the Bell Beast before she fully shifts to her second phase, which I love. It involves a lot of precise attacks and perfectly getting her health to the phase threshold, followed by a lot of silk spears. This level of depth is super fun, but as more players pick up on that fun method to beat the boss, Belbeast will become easier and easier by proxy. Still a great opening challenge for Hornet and the player. At number 38, we have the Pale Stag, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.29 out of 10, with 75 votes for easiest boss, and with 151 votes, the Pale Stag is my viewers' second worst boss in the game behind Zango. I think that's a tad overkill myself, especially when Broodmother exists, but I can see the lack of appeal. Pale Stag is an obnoxious hunt, teleporting away the moment you get damage in, sometimes even before you get damage in, while sending sharp wind slices in your direction. It's very Airman from Mega Man 2 coded, with you needing to find your way through each attack pattern to strike the boss before it vanishes. It's an endurance test, as dodging the attacks is a mostly trivial affair, unless you get overwhelmed, which has happened on occasion. You just have to keep up your stamina so you can keep chasing the boss, avoiding the ever-growing amount of projectiles until the boss is down. Or you can just ignore the fight altogether, complete the rest of Lost Vidania, kill the Clover Dancers, and the game will give you the Pale Stag journal entry regardless. At number 37, we have the Summoned Savior, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.38 out of 10, with 7 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. This is the Steel Soul exclusive fight where the boss floats around the arena using all the Abyss-style attacks you've come to know and love in Act 3. And as a fight, I wasn't sure where this would land, because I'd say the you only have one attempt to beat this boss aspect would make it rank higher. And yet a majority of the Summoned Savior's votes landed between the 1 to 5 out of 10 category. In my poll, I gave the voters the option to skip bosses that they hadn't faced, so while we had 276 voters, only 103 of them actually had experiences with the Summoned Savior. And while I did find a way to ensure that the averages still reflect the difficulty, regardless of certain bosses having less overall votes than others, I can't help but think Summoned Savior is such an outlier that this placement is still heavily suspect. I think it should be a tad higher myself, but then the moveset isn't that complex. Summoned Savior remains a mystery. At number 36, we have Lace in the Deep Docks, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.47 out of 10, with 43 votes for easiest boss. This is our first of 3 fights with the Daughter of Silk, and while here she is at her easiest, she still puts up a good fight. For example, we have to learn her moveset from scratch on a first playthrough, something the other 2 Lace fights already give you a leg up on. She's got a parry that will mess you up if you trigger it, and if you recall in Hollow Knight that parries were mostly saved for tough late game bosses, you'll know how threatening it is to see one in Silksong's early game. Her dive attack has a lot more momentum than first thought, which can lead to her feeling slippy and you having to adjust, and her final attack, while simple to dodge out of the AoE, can still catch players off guard with how intimidating it looks. Lace doesn't scare me anymore after Lost to Lace exists, but she serves the exact same purpose as Hornet in Hollow Knight and will definitely catch some players off guard with her precise swings and the way she reacts to the player's attacks. She's reactive, and that immediately brings the difficulty up compared to some of her earlier entries. But her future fights blow her out of the water as, small spoilers, Lace Cradle and Lost Lace are both within the top 10. At number 35, we have the Great Conch Flies, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.58 out of 10, with 35 votes for easiest boss. I really like the Great Conch Flies, the optional battle in the blasted steppes. They take the concept of the little Driznit enemy types and pop off. You have to dodge them as they drill through the arena, watching for the smoke and dust clouds that signal where they're going to emerge. They'll drill in a straight line until they hit another wall, and vanish, rinse and repeat. Every now and then one of them will fire a projectile cone that bounces around the room, which will somehow manage to hit you no matter how skilled you are at the game. Even if it doesn't hit you, it probably hit you in another timeline. The greatest challenge of this fight is the speed, as you have to stay on top of your platforming abilities to actually avoid most of the attacks, otherwise you will find a quick death waiting for you. But this speed is still child's play compared to the rematch later in the game. There are other Act 1 bosses that are much tougher by design, as we'll see in the rest of the video. But let it be known that the Great Conch Flies nail their difficulty, and I feel they're perfectly balanced as all things should be. At number 34, we have Gur the Outcast, who scored a total difficulty average of 3.99 out of 10, with 25 votes for easiest boss and 2 votes for hardest boss. Now here's a fight that tests a player's patience like never before. Gur is a hunter and a trapper, preferring to launch his spike traps around the arena than actually doing damage with his own fists. Maybe he'll dive across the floor in a sudden surprise move to strike Hornet, or while you're jumping to avoid one of his traps, he'll burst up from the floor and hit you on the rise. Effectively, Gur is trying to space you out and position you right where he wants. And I love this, because you can play Hornet the exact same way with her vast multitude of tools at her disposal. There's always a way to avoid Gur's attacks, and you can set off his traps yourself by striking them to remove them early. The fight's difficulty largely depends on your ability to control the space of the arena. If you play passively, you'll find less chances to strike the boss because there will always be traps upon traps in your way at any given moment. You can't be afraid. Weave through those traps and take this guy out. He gives you ample healing time between attacks, and you'll likely have 9 masks by the time you face him. In fact, for me, Gur's side quest was always my last mask shard in each of my playthroughs. You're set in your playstyle, you know how to win, you can adapt, overcome, and hunt the hunter. At number 33, we have the Watcher at the Edge, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.08 out of 10, with 16 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. Another encounter you can only face towards the tail end of Act 3. You have to find this obscure spot in the sands of Karak and then silk soar upwards to reach his arena. His greatsword is large, in charge, he hits hard, and has a surprising far range with each swing. I've had multiple heal attempts where I thought, I'm out of range, only to get clipped by the tip of his sword, and no amount of distance will save you because he can close the gap by going beneath the ground. And his tracking in mid-air means you have to perfectly time your dodges to not have him coming slamming down atop of you. His runback is a nightmare regardless of the bench you're coming from, and all you get for this is a fucking memento. But with the right tools, some good silk skill usage, and a bit of patience, the Watcher at the Edge is certainly doable. I imagine the parry would come in handy here since a lot of his attacks are telegraphed heavily, or the cog flies for passive damage while you're dodging through his swings. I definitely would have him ranked higher as he really doesn't give you any healing time and the runback is one of the most tedious in the game, but you guys voted for number 33. At number 32, we have the Father of the Flame, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.1 out of 10, with 18 votes for easiest boss and 6 votes for hardest boss. Your mileage against the Father of Flame will vary depending heavily on your crest, as this is a boss fight where pogoing is a requirement to reach his upper weak points. You have to smash 4 torches while avoiding the various wisp flames that attack you as you do so. The tracking is deceptively tricky, and it's very easy to find yourself hanging in midair with no movement abilities left to avoid a fireball. You have to find the right rhythm that allows you to do damage quickly without leaving yourself open. And if you have a really bad pogo, you just have to accept your fate. Magma Bell is a requirement if you don't want to rage, but once you reach the second phase, the fight gets significantly easier. From there, you stay on the ground, avoiding fireballs and attacking the boss's main weak spot between attacks, before finally avoiding the structure as it burns out when you win. It is that first half that brings the difficulty up. Mid-air platforming and boss fights are just inherently trickier than fights that keep you on the ground. It reminds me heavily of a boss from Salt and Sanctuary, the Tree of Men, which had a very similar premise, while also giving creepy Wicker Man vibes as well. Really cool design, a nice secret, decently tough. At number 31, we have Crawfather, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.15 out of 10, with 13 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. The difficulty of the Crawfather doesn't really come from the boss himself. He has the ability to fly like the other Craws, he has a rather brutal peck attack that goes on for most of the arena, and he has a really cool chain attack where he launches chains outwards that spike into existence and harm you if you're touching them. But this isn't anything too difficult compared to what you're used to in Act 3. The challenge comes from the enemy gauntlet to reach him, the Court of Craws. You have to face multiple Craw jurors on your journey to take him down, and even after the battle against the boss begins, he has the power to summon more of his minions as the fight progresses. In fact, I would say that his minions are actually the difficult part of the fight. They're smaller, harder to hit, move faster, and can prove overwhelming on top of his own moveset. It's still easier than the High Hall's gauntlet, and the reward being a constant source of rosaries in Act 3 is tempting to say the least. Overall, a fairly under-the-radar fight, where without his cronies, I definitely see him this low on the difficulty scale. At number 30, we have Crust King Khan, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.37 out of 10, with 29 votes for easiest boss and 7 votes for hardest boss. A personal favourite of mine, Crust King Khan is similar to fights like Gur the Outcast and even Voltverm, in that the real challenge is your positioning. Khan will attack using Geomancy, Earthbending, sending coral spires at you in various setups to try and knock you out. Other than that, the main danger is contact damage, which you'll be surprised at how many times you'll get hit by him, because he always jumps up, then backs off to his original position when logic dictates he should be falling forwards. You have to stay close to him to deal damage while weaving through his pillars of coral, and later on, the various coral spikes he can summon across the roof and floor of the arena. He gets faster and faster, and if you lose the rhythm, you'll be taking multiple hits while trying to claw back your power, but I find this dance incredibly intuitive. What isn't intuitive though, is the small enemy gauntlet you have to do prior to the fight. You can create a shortcut after the third Coral Tower arena, but the fourth and final enemy gauntlet must always be fought before you face Khan, a trope I just don't care for in Silksong. Let me fight the cool boss. If you feel their difficulty is lacking, and thus you need to make up for it by including an enemy gauntlet, then redesign the boss's moveset to feel more threatening and remove the gauntlet entirely. Still, I think if Khan were overly difficult, I wouldn't love him as much, and compared to Nihilith and Carmelita, I'm glad one of the three old hearts was a tad on the easier side. At number 29, we have Sister Splinter, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.39 out of 10, with 7 votes for easiest boss and 2 votes for hardest boss. An early game wall for first-time Silksong players, Sister Splinter may not have the most complex moveset, but makes up for it with her own brand of chaos. She is what I call an arena manipulator, able to use one of her moves to create thick vines that ensnare you in a smaller playable area. Her goal being to keep you trapped in such a small space that you can't avoid her alternating claw slams that follow up. Aside from that, she can summon 2 Splinter Barks midway through the fight, and can re-summon them afterwards periodically. These are the true dangers of this fight, as the Splinter Barks fly out of reach, hit hard when they come down to attack, and are generally just no-nonsense enemy types who won't hesitate to mess the player up. Getting the Silkstorm ability from Greymoor makes this a lot easier to manage, and from there you just dodge Splinter's single attack pattern until she goes down. As long as you don't box yourself in and keep an aggressive playstyle, Sister Splinter will eventually fall. But the way she traumatized a lot of early players with her arena manipulation is not to be underestimated. I found it really funny when I fought her because I beat her first try, only to go online and see that people think she's lit everybody's house on fire with her difficulty. At number 28, we have disgraced Chef Lagoli, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.6 out of 10, with 5 votes for easiest boss and 2 votes for hardest boss. And my viewers voted them as their 9th least favourite in the game, alongside Father of the Flame, both getting 40 votes. Is it the booty animations? I know they can be scary. Lagoli is not a terribly complex boss. They have a handful of attacks they roll through, like slamming their ladle to send projectiles arcing across the arena, using the butt to create momentum that sends them towards the player, and diving underwater before bursting up and spreading maggots everywhere. The maggots are annoying because if you're infected by them, you have to waste a bind to remove the effect, meaning you can't heal. This can be rectified with the Wreath of Purity found in the Putrefied Ducts, but you have to go very far out of your way to actually find that item. It's honestly easier to just learn Lagoli's spacing and go from there. The main skill is simply getting in the way of the player. They're very good at closing distance and remaining up in your face so you can't heal, something I saw mainly during my partner's run at the Chef. This is a fight where taking your time and not overreacting pays dividends. Sometimes you can afford to be the aggressor, but with Lagoli, you want to let them come to you. Observe from afar, keep your distance when you can so you have all the time in the world to dodge the maggot projectiles, and you'll squeak out a win. At number 27, we have Broodmother, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.64 out of 10, with 21 votes for easiest boss and 11 votes for hardest boss, alongside 141 votes for worst boss. I'm so happy that my most hated boss in the game is also hated by the fans. It feels nice to be on the right side of the fence for once. Broodmother is an annoying fight. You have to deal with some pesky guards before she shows herself, and once she appears, she does everything in her power to corner you. Shooting goop that causes Hornet to get stuck if struck, birthing babies whose sole mission is to attack Hornet and then die in an explosion, or flinging herself across the arena willy-nilly. I really wish those baby's explosions actually damaged the boss. It would have given the fight so much more depth, and would have made it more easier to manage. Oh, and Broodmother can also Gruzmother slam between the ceiling and floor, which you need to dodge beneath. Her arena is fairly small, her attacks are relentless, and she has a surprising amount of health for the moment she's fought in game, and it led to multiple retries, both from myself and my viewers. She may still be a 4.64 out of 10 because there are just so many bosses in Hollow Knight Silksong, but honestly, and maybe this is just me, I think a lot of these bosses are having their difficulty heavily undersold by like a whole point, so in my mind she's more of like a 5.64. At number 26, we have the Cogwork Dancers, who scored a total difficulty average of 4.71 out of 10, with 12 votes for easiest boss and 3 votes for hardest boss. More importantly, with 160 votes for best boss, they are considered your 4th best fight in the game by my viewers. I love the Cogwork Dancers, man. They're your first boss fight in Act 2, so the difficulty isn't anything outrageous, and yet without proper care or spacing, you can still find yourself getting demolished. Something about the range of the Dancers' claw slices when they land always catches players off guard, as the hitbox is larger than you'd expect. But at the same time, they advertise all of their moves. You know where they're going at any given moment, and the 2 alternate moves they have are also very telegraphed, be it the central spin, where you need to remain on the edge of the arena, or the linear slices, where you have to avoid the various white lines to not get stuck. The main challenge comes from the speeding up between phases, and the eventual alternation of their movements in the 3rd phase. When you're used to both of them moving in sync, suddenly having one dancer moving one after the other can throw you completely out of whack. It's not as hard as the bosses that end Act 1, either Last Judge or Phantom, but that's also the point. Cogwork Dancers are there to give you a fun, emotional, and unique fight that places more emphasis on a cool mechanic than on actual difficulty. They are perfect. No notes. At number 25, we have Lost Garmond, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.05 out of 10, with 5 votes for easiest boss and 7 votes for hardest boss. Lost Garmond is the Abyss variant of Garmond and Zaza, where Garmond has been infected by black threads and fights solo. He's like the Summon Savior in that all of his attacks utilize the various void mechanics, resulting in a lot of AoE spam. His dive now shoots out these balls of darkness that expand into blades, and by god, if he raises his arm to fire projectiles in your direction, just take the damage. I found them so difficult to avoid to where I was dying constantly, as every hit he manages deals 2 masks of damage. Once you learn to pogo over him during the projectile attack and to avoid being above him when he uses his overhead swing, the fight does get significantly easier. But I'm not convinced I could beat Lost Garmond right now without dying a couple times. The man just psychs me out, and it's all those abyssal attacks that cause it. He lands right around this list's midpoint, but I'd personally bump his difficulty up a few placements from personal experience, especially when this fight has the added difficulty of trying to see through your tears that are streaming down your face. At number 24, we have the Pinstress, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.17 out of 10, with 2 votes for easiest boss and 6 votes for hardest boss. And she got 29 votes for worst boss, which I didn't expect, but I can totally see. The Pinstress is a master of staying out of your way. She uses her Broly Float form to hang in the skies while waiting for her chance to strike, either by throwing a series of pin projectiles, or by attempting to punish you with a Nightmare King Grim dash combo. Every now and then she uses her cross/pin art, which forces you to either stay extremely close or get extremely far away to avoid, and all these attacks repeat until she goes down. You often have to wait until she's on ground level, doing a little thrust attacks to actually punish her with a few down pogos, as in the air she's simply too good at avoiding damage, especially if you accidentally stun her in midair and she falls off the arena. She'll vanish until the stagger is over before reappearing, but it means you don't get a chance to actually damage her during that window, which sucks a lot. Combo that with a high health pool and you have a deceptively tricky fight that can take a few tries at the best of times. For a Pinstress though, I was expecting her to be more in your face than she actually is. She plays more cautiously than her animations suggest, and that dissonance is partly why I think some players, myself included, don't fully vibe with her. At number 23, we have the Clover Dancers, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.26 out of 10, with 8 votes for easiest boss and 4 votes for hardest boss. They actually tied in points with the next entry on the list, but the other entry had more votes for hardest boss, which broke the tie. Clover dancers are a slightly tougher variant of the cogwork dancers, dropping you right into their faster waltz as the dance begins. All of the attacks are the exact same as the previous fight, telegraph movements, and the same special moves that can be broken out mid-battle. The only difference here being that when they come together in the center of the arena, they form a two-sided tornado that will rotate either clockwise or anti-clockwise, and you have to jump around them to avoid the attack, which is deceptively tricky, as you've likely seen me getting clipped in my footage. They also offset their attacks earlier into the fight, which can catch players off guard, but overall your nail upgrades by this point in the game should ensure a quicker fight than the cogwork dancers. Harder by default, as it takes away the training wheels for their mechanics, but I'd say Clover dancers are the boss that separates the easier fights in the game from the tougher ones, as every battle from now on can be considered quite difficult. At number 22, we have the second Sentinel, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.26 out of 10, with 3 votes for easiest boss and 5 votes for hardest boss. How funny that she's only a couple entries withdrawn from the Pinstress when they share such a similar fighting style. The second Sentinel is more methodical in their approach though. They will try to fight you with precise movements and a healthy amount of backstepping. They'll do attacks in an attempt to strike you down, only to hop away so you can't capitalize. They have access to the cross slash, which can be brutal if you're caught in the blast, and if you're in midair, they have a spinning whirl attack that raises them towards you with efficiency. The only attack that, while cool, feels a tad underbaked, are the second Sentinel's energy waves. They can fire beams from their scissor blades, which rocket diagonally or horizontally across the screen, but 9 times out of 10, it's easy to avoid. Second Sentinel also has access to Lace's parry, complete with the same stabbing riposte follow-up if you trigger it, which is more dangerous due to the boss's larger weapon hitbox, and their combos are lengthy and can prove deadly. While not the toughest fight in the game, Second Sentinel ends up being incredibly fun to learn, and by the time you've mastered the moveset, you might not find them terribly hard, but you'll find them beautifully fun. At number 21, we have Phantom, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.43 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 4 votes for hardest boss, alongside a solid 57 votes for best boss in the game. I really love Phantom. While I often make the claim that Lace is the Hornet of Silksong, it's actually Phantom who captures the energy of the original Hornet boss from Hollow Knight so well. This is because of her signature long pin weapon, where she will first launch the pin towards you, then follow up with a dash towards her weapon along the same path. Your muscle memory and logic dictates you need to avoid the needle, but then you end up in the path of Phantom's dash. So you have to learn to lead your shots and anticipate where Phantom is going to land so you can dodge and do some damage. She also has her cross-stitch parry, which even when I triggered, I found it quite easy to dodge the follow-up attack. I'd also say that her regular combo is deceptively tricky as it covers a lot of distance. Phantom's at her most difficult though when she fills the room with smoke, teleporting willy-nilly while using her Lightfall Slam to try and crush you beneath her might. It's also an attack that is easily punishable once you figure out which Lightfall is the last in her combo, but I digress. Phantom really messed me up just because the way you dodge her attacks is a little different to the rest of Act 1's rogue gallery, and even on repeated runs, I still find her challenging. She's a top 10 fight in the game for me, and I'm glad she landed here in the upper half of the difficulty ranking. At number 20, we have Cygnus and Gron, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.51 out of 10, with 3 votes for easiest boss and 1 vote for hardest boss. This duo definitely rank this high on the list because they benefit from the rather interesting difficulty perk of being a gank fight. It just gets you more points, whether it's deserved or not. You face Cygnus first, who can summon a few enemies midway through the fight. He throws his weapon like a boomerang and you have to hop over it and take pot shots, avoiding it as it returns. That's simple enough. Then he has a short melee combo you have to back away from, and, well, then Gron joins the fight, bringing 2 moves of his own. A spear throw where he'll chuck his spear in the direction of the player, and if it hits the ground, it'll stick and shortly explode soon after. Otherwise, he'll just do an explosive dive you have to dodge away from to avoid the aforementioned explosion. Because this pair only have 2 attacks each, it's very easy to play patient and just wait for your opportunities to strike. They never attack at the same time, so you're never overwhelmed, with the only real danger coming after one brother goes down, and the other starts trying to escape you while dropping lava down the center of the arena. Magma Bell is perfect for this fight, as it minimizes so much of the potential damage, making an already simple gank even simpler. But I can understand the struggle here. Without the Magma Bell, all the attacks do 2 damage, and you can accidentally hit the lava pillars on the side of the arena for even more damage. So if you're not good at spatial awareness or pattern recognition, these 2 can be a real pain. At number 19, we have Grandmother Silk, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.52 out of 10, with 2 votes for easiest boss and 9 votes for hardest boss. Context is very important here. Grandmother Silk is a final boss of Silksong. You have to challenge her atop Farloom with your goal being to bring the god down. But she's also just the final boss of Act 2, hiding an entire third of the game behind her battle once you have all the necessary requirements. So in that sense, it makes sense that she's a much easier final boss than Lost Lace, Radiance, or the Hollow Knight. Grandmother Silk's main abilities are the needles that she manipulates, throwing them at Hornet via horizontal or vertical patterns which you have to dodge through. She also has a swipe attack she can combo with her needles, which caught me off guard a few times, and she has an attack where she spreads silk lines across the arena, and if you're touching one when the attack triggers, you get caught in a grab that deals 3 masks of damage. At half health, she returns to the fight, able to cause rock falls that block off portions of the arena, making it harder to see all her needles, and she can create spikes on the floor that you can knock down with some well-placed pogos. Overall, Grandmother Silk takes elements that we're familiar with from the old Radiance fight, but doesn't really amp up the difficulty. Instead, it's more about the spectacle of overcoming her in finishing Act 2 that has a higher precedent, and it works in the game's favour. After all, if Team Cherry want to make a Grandmother Silk who's as difficult as Hollow Knight's Radiance, they can do that in whatever DLCs they decide to develop. At number 18, we have Wang, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.57 out of 10, with 15 votes for hardest boss. While there are still other Act 1 bosses who my voters consider to be tougher than Wang, I can't deny this guy was one heck of a wall. Did it help that I fought him when his blade toss ability did 2 masks of damage instead of 1? Perhaps. But even with that nerf, I still think Wang earns his spot as a very difficult fight. He has a swooping attack that every flying boss in the series can seemingly do. He has a quick swipe attack that does 2 masks of damage if you're caught in the hits, and his blade toss where he summons wind fans in various patterns. It's pretty simple in the first half, with the blade pattern going horizontally along the ground, but the moment the second half hits, it gets very confusing. He'll begin tossing blades after every swoop, and his regular blade toss now shoots out 2 projectiles, with the second curling back towards the boss in some sort of a loop. And somehow it will always hit the player, no matter where you are. Wang is a professional sniper, and staying beneath the boss to hit him from below doesn't work because of his inverted blade toss, where he launches 2 blades around him towards the ground, which clink against each other before roaming off in different directions. And put on top of this Wang's large health pool, and the fact you're fighting him in Act 1, and you have a fight that is understandably very tough. Even with Garmond and Zaza helping you, Wang can still get the better of your band. Though you can also postpone his fight to Act 2 via the Flea quest, which makes him a little easier, and Act 3 Wang? We don't talk about him, oh no. At number 17, we have The Unraveled, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.58 out of 10, with 2 votes for easiest boss and 25 votes for hardest boss, alongside 61 votes for worst boss, making it my viewers' 7th least favourite fight in Silksong. The Unraveled is a fight that clearly a lot of people don't know how to feel about, with his votes being all over the place. Bosses that rank highly in these lists tend to have a unified front from the voters, skewing towards a certain set of numbers. For example, a lot of 5s or 6s, or a lot of 7s and 8s. The Unraveled, meanwhile, just doesn't have that voter consensus. We have just as many voters who ranked him a 3 out of 10 versus an 8 out of 10. For me, The Unraveled is straight up one of the toughest fights in the game. I'd suck. I don't like his massive hitbox that constantly clips me. I don't like the surgical scalpels that he uses throughout the fight, which always manage to hit me when I'm trying to avoid them. I don't like that he summons regular enemies midway through the fight between phases, even if they're not that difficult. And worst of all, that damned projectile attack the boss does is just so hard for me to figure out. I can't explain it beyond, it just feels like this boss has aimbot. The Unraveled also has a high HP pool, even with all the upgrades in the game, which makes fighting it very tedious no matter the moment. Definitely deserving of a high spot on today's list. I could justify him being even higher under the right circumstances, but that requires the community to come to more of a consensus around this fight. His very missable fight that has a fucking Silk Heart locked behind it. What the fuck, Team Cherry? At least he's susceptible to the cross-stitch parry. We have a couple silver linings here and there. At number 16, we have the Raging Conchfly, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.63 out of 10, with 2 votes for easiest boss and 10 votes for hardest boss. I am very vindicated in seeing the Raging Conchfly this high in the rankings because it is so easy to stumble upon him way earlier than the game intends. While you can explore the sands of Kadak from the moment you obtain the claw line, the Raging Conchfly is an extremely tanky boss who benefits from collecting the Great Tastes of Farloom and Citadel nail upgrades before you take him on. The reason being that this Conchfly is much faster and deadlier than before, and healing is a lot harder as a result. The boss will always target the location of Hornet, either appearing horizontally or vertically to strike her. It can also fire the diagonal conches like its first appearance, up to 2 at a time if it feels fruity enough, and further along it also works in some smaller Conchflies into its moveset by utilizing its children to attack you. They can dash at you horizontally like bullets, drilling to the left or right, often followed by their master, or the boss can summon multiple smaller Conchflies from the ceiling and floor to try and contact damage you. If you don't have the DPS to ensure this fight ends quickly, you will be caught in a battle that requires a lot of mental fortitude to succeed long term. You're a glass cannon, and just 2 hits is enough to knock you out of your rhythm and back to the nearest bench. I actually really like this fight, and I can't wait to do it without the slightly annoying vertical runback so I can appreciate the challenge even better. At number 15, we have the Bell Eater, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.65 out of 10, with 3 votes for easiest fight and 7 votes for hardest fight. The Bell Eater is a fairly simple encounter in premise, but makes up for it with a moveset that can overwhelm with ease. You arrive in the arena and are gated off to the left and right by the boss's large body. The boss will periodically reveal its face or its tail, attacking you from either end. The face involves either a series of spitting in a downward cone or a flail of the legs and body parts that can damage you if you're too close, while the tail shoots out explosive orbs that blow up after a short period of time. And it's the tail that facilitates the Bell Eater's difficulty. The boss can only be damaged on specific parts of its hitbox, often leaving you in range of its attacks. I've been blasted in the face by an explosive orb while attacking the boss's tail more times than I care to admit. It can also retract its body and begin crawling along the ceiling and the floor of the arena, causing bells to drop down as it does so. It's an evolution of the move from the Bell Beast fight, and with the added danger of you needing to stay in the air to avoid the Bell Eater's body, it adds an extra layer of challenge. Then the face and tail begin appearing at the same time, and let me tell you, when you've got explosive orbs and Bell Eater spit attacking at the same time, it's very easy to get a little overwhelmed and mess up an attack or position yourself in the wrong spot. Patience is key, as you can try waiting for tail and face combinations that don't leave you so open to damage. Beyond that, you just have to be prepared to deal what you can. It's a brutal fight, and what a boss to introduce Act 3. At number 14, we have Nihilith, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.75 out of 10, with 5 votes for easiest boss and 10 votes for hardest boss. 17 votes for best boss in the game though, which puts her in the double digits club. Nihilith was always going to land highly in the difficulty ranking for the simple fact that half of her fight takes place without any floor to land on. Recall that infamous sequence in the Colosseum of Fools from Hollow Knight, where you had to fight certain enemy types while wall climbing and pogoing to survive? Well, now we've got a boss fight that does the same thing, only now you've got to deal with attack patterns that are genuinely quite tough to manage. A giant AoE that you have to retreat across the arena to avoid, a series of smaller projectiles fired in a spread that are deceptively tricky to weave through. Nihilith can choose to swap sides whenever she feels like, just to keep you feeling the challenge. She's got a melee attack if you get within range and you're punishing too much, and she can summon spiked balls throughout the arena that, while you can pogo off of, or even hit in her direction, often caught me off guard. I'm just not very good at this style of combat. It's not what I enjoy, even if I understand that Hornet's moveset is built for intuitive aerial fights. Nihilith's main saving grace is that she doesn't have a high health pool in comparison to the other major bosses of Act 3, meaning the fight doesn't last as long, but she's still going to make you work for it. At number 13, we have the Savage Beastfly of the Chapel of the Beast, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.94 out of 10, with 3 votes for easiest boss and 44 votes for hardest boss. And oh wow, it's your 6th most hated boss in the game with 113 votes. Who could have seen that coming? The difficulty of the Savage Beastfly is completely dependent on when you decide to fully explore Hunter's March. If you do it during the early portion of Act 1 after obtaining the Drifter's Cloak, you are going to suffer. A non-upgraded Nail would be fine against the Beastfly on his own, but in this battle he's able to summon 3 different mob types: a Beastfly, a Killick, or a Vicious Caranid. The Caranids are by far the most dangerous mobs with the most health and the ability to deal double damage, but all of them can be crushed by the Beastfly's slam attack, so you can play around with that to your advantage. The Beastfly on his own just swoops from side to side and tries to crush you with his slams. It's not that hard of a moveset, but the Savage Beastfly's tracking when it comes to his sweeps is surprisingly tricky. You might want to try and have him go low or high, but then he just takes the annoying middle ground route instead, which is way harder to avoid. I do think as players get better with Silksong, they'll learn to handle this boss. If you come back with Act 1's nail upgrade, or even in Act 2 with multiple nail upgrades, you're not going to struggle. Now, his big brother in the Farfields, that's where I think my community and I agree. At number 12, we have Chakra, who scored a total difficulty average of 5.99 out of 10, with 24 votes for hardest boss. A missable encounter you can only do in Act 2 after finishing her questline, Chakra will spar with you outside Bellheart. Now, her moveset is limited. She can throw multiple rings in the air to try and strike you, she can teleport above Hornet to slam down against the ground, creating a small AoE you have to avoid, and she has a thrusting dash attack where she zooms past Hornet before turning back to throw a ring if Hornet is behind her. That's it. That's all Chakra does. That and teleport around the arena due to her blinding speed. The challenge is that she doesn't give you any downtime. Her attacks are relentless, fast-paced, and tricky to dodge. You sometimes think you've avoided a shot, only for a ring to ricochet off the floor and back into you. You have to find openings that work for you and play aggressive while still being cognizant of what Chakra's doing next. And this is incredibly difficult. Hitting her is tough because she likes to teleport away, meaning that your main opportunities to deal damage have to come from you countering her attacks. The thrust, if you can avoid the follow-up ring, is fantastic to punish, and if you want to risk face-tanking attacks until she staggers, it's honestly not the worst strategy in the world. Good on Chakra for being up here, really proves that she's not just a skilled cartographer, but a skilled warrior as well. At number 11, we have Widow, who scored a total difficulty average of 6.04 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 23 votes for hardest boss. In terms of Act 1, Widow is a major roadblock and turning point. She holds Bellheart in her clutches, and once you defeat her, you gain the Needle In and a Nail upgrade, making her your final challenge with the basic damage output of your Needle, and thus, Team Cherry made her tough. Whether Widow is pulling on silk strings to launch bells at the player from every angle, or dashing along the floor while causing debris to spike up and impale Hornet, you get the sense this boss is trying everything she can to defeat you. She also comes with a Nightmare King Grim aerial lunge, where she appears above Hornet, dashes down to her position, and then launches to the left or right with slicing melee claw swipes. It's tough to initially take all of this in, but Widow's vulnerability comes when she's pulling her bells. She stays stationary in those moments, and you can spam a lot of attacks if you dash up close before she can flee. Then she fakes her defeat before going into a final frenzy. She'll charge across the arena with her claw swipes, often comboed with falling bells from the ceiling, and she defaults to using the diagonal bell rain when pulling her silk strings. Projectiles are flying everywhere in this fight, but spacing and patience are the key here. Widow is brutal, she doesn't hold anybody's hand, and really asks the player to get good in order to progress. A skill check for the rest of the game that, if you can defeat, should secure you a good pace till Act 3. I think a solid 6 is a good spot for her, but I'd be willing to bump her up to a 6.5 or a 7 personally. At number 10, we have Trobbio, who scored a total difficulty average of 6.06 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 5 votes for hardest boss. Our haughty thespian has two of the most in-depth fights in the game in terms of his moveset, and coming near the start of Act 2 means you likely only have the first nail upgrade when you face him. Trobbio's got Sparkle, he's got Razzle Dazzle, and a rather annoying tornado move that always manages to clip me while I try and jump over it. Beyond that, Trobbio has the ability to create small sparkling explosions in AoEs around the arena, he can hunker under the floorboards and launch explosive bombs into the air, or just throw the bombs from the sky, and these explosives will spill out smoke in the direction they're going to explode, Bomberman style. Avoiding them can be tough when they build up, or when Trobbio combos them with other attacks, but you can at least hit the orbs away in case that's more your style. His second phase attack, where he dives under the floorboards and creates a ton of linear explosions though, is where he gets dangerous. He'll pop up afterwards and begin flying until he launches into one of his other attacks, and you just have to make sure you're damaging him before he can escape or counter back. There's just so much to keep track of that it's very easy to get clipped by an attack you didn't realize was heading your way. A lot of visual clutter, as it were. That's not a bad thing, it works for Trobbio in his extra ways, but it certainly exemplifies why he landed this high on the list. Trobbio will always be a mid-game benchmark, and sets off our top 10 in sparkling fashion. At number 9, we have the last judge, who scored a total difficulty average of 6.79 out of 10, 6-7, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 57 votes for hardest boss, alongside a solid 50 votes for best boss in the game. Now the question remains, did the last judge make it this high on the list purely because her runback is so infamous, or did she make it this high on the list because her moveset is genuinely tricky to learn and tough to master? The answer for me is a bit of both, but I'm actually leaning more towards her moveset being the determining difficulty factor. Part of this is because once she activates her flames, all of her attacks now do 2 masks of damage, and there are a lot of players who will have skipped the Magma Bell all the way back in Deep Docks. So the idea of learning the base moveset with all the normal attacks, followed by the idea of learning all of the fire aspected moveset where all the normal attacks are altered in some way, becomes that much more difficult. And yet, it's one of the best movesets in the game. In a vacuum, I love jumping over her slam into fire waves, or dashing past her charge and positioning myself to dodge the incoming fire pillars. I love dashing in when she throws her weapon forwards to get a cheeky hit before jump dashing out as she pulls it back toward her, dodging the fire streams as she uses her enrage move that leaves her defenseless for a short while. Even that evil little explosion at the end that can kill the player and force a repeat of the fight, it's all devious, well designed, and very fun to master. If it wasn't for a pain in the ass first playthrough runback, as well as the double damage for a majority of the fight, I think people would see her quality. But hey, she's certainly difficult, and the toughest boss in Act 1, according to my viewers. At number 8, we have the Savage Beastfly rematch in the Farfields, who scored a total difficulty average of 6.82 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 82 votes for hardest boss, alongside a whopping 141 votes for worst boss in the game. Suffice it to say, the community does not like this fight, the reason being the changes to the original. The arena at the fight is that of the 4th chorus, complete with a destructible floor that the Savage Beastfly can snuff out with its slam attacks. You effectively have to manage your own playable space while still dodging the boss's sweeps and slams, which is more difficult than it looks. Then, early into the fight, the boss gains the ability to summon termites, flying bugs that fire explosive flame shots that deal double damage unless you've got the Magma Bell. These are obnoxious enemy types to fight, and combined with the Beastfly's movement, it's very easy to lose track of one element of the fight and take damage because of it. Oh, you slipped into the lava? That's 2 masks of damage. Oh, now you missed a fireball, and now you're being blasted upwards into the Savage Beastfly's next sweep attack. It can feel absolutely crushing, and yet, my audience has lowballed this boss. 6.82, for all the bitching I have seen in the community over the Savage Beastfly rematch, this should be in the 7s to 8s, I'm just saying. But then I can't say I had much trouble with this fight myself. It didn't enrage me since I came prepared with the right tools equipped to minimize damage, and I have a generally good track record at managing arena layouts, so the broken terrain didn't faze me as much. It's just those termites that really throw me off my game. The Savage Beastfly's moveset doesn't even change from his first fight. Let me know what you guys think. Do you think my voters lowballed this entry, or is it right where it should be? At number 7, we have Shrine Guardian Seth, who scored a total difficulty average of 7.03 out of 10, with 77 votes for hardest boss and 56 votes for best boss. I'm so happy for Seth. His fight could best be described as having the tricky movements of Lace, but with his shield tosses having elements of Chakra's rings. Seth has a lot of health and is determined to be a Guardian that doesn't go down without a fight, and while his aggression with his pin attacks are obviously worthy of note here, as well as his movement as he's able to move around the arena with deft ease, the difficulty of his fight comes from the shield he wields, a symbol that protects him from oncoming damage, while also acting as a Captain America-style throwing weapon that can bounce along the environment to catch Hornet off guard. He can also crash to the ground with his symbol, creating a large AoE that he can then dash out of to deal more damage, while later in the fight he repeats the crash combo 3 times for maximum efficiency. And yet it's still that move where he throws the shield diagonally at the ground and has it bounce diagonally upwards that catches me off guard the most. I always think he's about to symbol crash only to get a face full of shield. Now, unlike most bosses in Silksong, Seth's phase 2, where his attacks get more deadly, happens at around 40% health. Most bosses tend to enrage at 30% or under right before they're about to die, but Seth continues to make you work for that victory by forcing you to deal with his upgraded moveset for a longer period. He's one of the few fights I love to go needle only, no red tools, because it scratches that itch I love for a proper one-on-one duel to the death. He is right where he should be. At number 6, we have Grohl the Great, who scored a total difficulty average of 7.09 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 90 votes for hardest boss, alongside 122 votes for worst boss in the game. Grohl is another last judge situation where the question becomes, do we judge this boss based on his moveset alone, or do we judge him based on the run back and the enemy gauntlet that leads up to his appearance? And I ask you, the viewer, does the sun rise? Do people parry that subscribe button to Billy S? Obviously, it's the fucking run back. Grohl forces players to traipse through the entirety of Bile Water from the Bellway station upon every defeat, unless you find the super hidden bench that is literally so well hidden most people won't know it exists without the guide of the internet. The amount of platforming you have to do here is insane. I don't want to see toxic green bubbles again for a few months, thanks, and when you do arrive, you have a mandatory enemy gauntlet that goes on for far too long. Grohl, by comparison, isn't even that bad. He can attempt to suck you in, he can fire explosive orbs at you that you need to avoid, he can dive down into the water and trigger enemies to attack you, or a giant trap to swing across the center of the arena, and midway through the fight he gains access to the Vengeful Spirit and blasts you with soul energy. It seems like a lot, but with patience and just letting Grohl come to you, you can really take advantage of his moveset. Until you fall into the water and get mucked, losing your ability to heal, and then you die from the tension of having to do such a long run back again. I really do firmly believe that there is a line between what is fun to repeat and what isn't, and Grohl's run back takes that line, snaps it in half, snorts it into his nose, and throws it into the poison. And for as long as the negative bile water feelings remain, Grohl will likely continue to top difficulty rankings of Silksong for years to come. At number 5, we have the First Sinner, who scored a total difficulty average of 7.21 out of 10, with 142 votes for hardest boss and 222 votes for best boss in the game, making the First Sinner my voter's favorite fight in Silksong. Congratulations! This boss takes elements from the fight with Widow, as well as the fight with Grandmother Silk, to create a unique challenge that pushes you to the very limits. The First Sinner uses the needles within her boss arena to attack the player in various different patterns, far more varied than that of Grandma. You have to close that distance and strike the Sinner before she can teleport, as once she does, she'll already be setting up her next attack. That could be more needles, it could be a melee charge similar to Widow Phase 2, it could be an aerial lunge where she tries to strike you down from above. All of these attacks pair together to create a hectic, fluid fight, where you're trying to stun the boss quick enough so you can heal and keep yourself in the fight, while her pace only continues to increase. The teleporting can seem a bit obnoxious at first, but by the end of the fight you'll be loving it. She also has the Rune Rage Weaver skill that she uses midway through. It creates circular AoEs around the arena that you have to not be touching when they explode, and when combined with other attacks like her needles, can create some tough to dodge setups. At least her contact damage is only 1 mask, that's a blessing. And dying here leaves you outside the boss fight, so no boss run back, or steal soul loss. The quick retry time might be what lands her at 5th instead of higher, or maybe it's because when you do have a good run against the first sinner, dodging her attacks just feels more intuitive than any other boss in the game. At number 4, we have Lace's rematch in the Cradle, which scored a total difficulty average of 7.28 out of 10, with 1 vote for easiest boss and 57 votes for hardest boss. There's a part of me that's surprised to see Lace 2 this high up in the rankings, but another part of me that acknowledges just how tough Lace's moveset can be for a lot of players. She uses the same attacks from her Deep Docks variant, except now, as the fight goes on, the attack chains get even tougher. She has a new parry, where she'll counter from an upwards diagonal position, her combos are quicker, and she adds an extra swing to her regular melee combo. She has the ability to punish Hornet if too close at the end of her lunge attack, and as the phases shift, her moveset evolves. Her launch upwards now leaves circular AoEs that deal damage after a short period. She now follows up her lunge with a second, which can then combo into the upwards launch, and now she chains her final Moulinet attack twice in a row. She can even follow you when you try to climb one of the arena's walls to escape her, but the right wall is so tall that even then you can scarper up it, jump off, and use the height to safely heal. It's just that the way Lace reacts to the player's inputs makes her feel so tough. She's like another player controlling her as opposed to an AI, and it's that element that really forges her difficulty. At number 3, we have Tormented Trobbio, who scored a total difficulty average of 7.39 out of 10, with 121 votes for hardest boss. Now, if I had my own ranking, Tormented Trobbio, at least based on where I'm at with Silksong now, would actually be my hardest boss. I find the various new intricacies of his moveset so difficult to deal with, from the way his tornadoes now leave a damaging sparkle trail in their wake, to the way his explosives now blast in 4 directions instead of 2. Hell, even his little sparkle AoEs are more dangerous with Trobbio actually firing off blasts from himself when he performs them. I just find the way this emo fuck flies around and uses all his moves to be so difficult to predict, and if you get hit by one attack, you'll likely be knocked back into others. Contact damage into Tornado, into Sparkle Trail is devious. And yet, at least Trobbio has the decency to always take damage when you hit him. He can't parry you, he can't block you, but by God he will throw everything in the kitchen sink in an attempt to blow your ass to Kingdom Come. A very deserved bronze medal finish for our favourite thespian. At number 2, we have Scar Singer Carmelita, who scored a total difficulty average of 8.89 out of 10, with 250 votes for hardest boss, as well as 211 votes for best boss in the game, landing her in 2nd place on that metric. So Carmelita is a microcosm of what makes Silksong bosses tough. She's got a brief enemy gauntlet that you have to fight through before she graces you with her presence. She has a block that feels inconsistent and makes it very frustrating to know when to actually damage her. It's apparently tied to a twirl she does between attacks, according to the wiki, but it's not evident enough to the average player to be readable. Her phase shifts add new moves, but more dangerously, reduces the time between her various attacks, which leads to an all-out tsunami of bones and cutters and slices in the final portion of the fight. And her health pool is vast, so you won't be able to luck into a win against Carmelita. She's got strong tracking, some of her moves will always manage to follow you, like the roll into bone spikes that emerge across the side of the arena you're on. She's got projectiles, she's got slashes, she can dash across the arena like a figure skater. The one plus side about her final phase is that because her attacks have 0 downtime, she doesn't have the ability to block attacks anymore, meaning you can absolutely go ham on her with the right build. Carmelita is a war of attrition. She wants you to get used to every move she's able to make so that as you press further and further into the battle, you're able to adapt to her moveset on the fly until you're effortlessly dodging her and finding your punish windows. Most players don't ever reach this point, taking hits but still managing to pull out a not so squeaky clean win. If there was ever a boss that justified a Godhome style DLC, it'd be Carmelita, for practice. At number 1, we have Lost Lace, who scored a total difficulty average of 9.37 out of 10, with 4 votes for easiest boss, the comedians are in full force today, and 262 votes for hardest boss. alongside 203 votes for best boss in the game, which has her as my viewer's third favourite. The true final boss of Hollow Knight Silksong, Lost Lace takes the moveset we all know and love, amplifies it to the nth degree, and applies abyssal attacks to it to create what is the toughest gauntlet of the game. So many journalists, YouTubers, and online players have mentioned being stuck here at Lost Lace for a vast period of time, and you know what? I get it. Her first phase is somewhat learnable. She does 3 lunges now, with void tentacles spawning where she passed over. She can now attack with her own tentacles mid-fight, which can catch you off guard. Phase 2, she gets 3 abyssal attacks, the void columns that you have to avoid standing in while also keeping an eye on Lace as she's able to appear from any of them to ambush you. She can summon projectiles to home in on the player from anywhere in the arena, and she can summon blobs that fall and create large blade-like circular AoEs. Phase 3, she gains the ability to send void waves after the player, and while her attack patterns slow down, you still have to have absolute mastery of your skills to overcome them. And Phase 4, the Lost Molinet. She marks multiple spots and teleports to each of them before slamming down, with the final circle coinciding with a slam followed by void tentacles emerging around her to stop any punishes. You simply have to adapt to all of Lost Lace's moves while avoiding these new attacks, and bish bash bosh, the game is complete. Without a doubt the toughest fight in the game, harder than most of Hollow Knight's boss fights aside from maybe Absolute Radiance's RNG fest in my opinion. If you beat Lost Lace, regardless of needle only, with tools, with silk skills, you have earned it. You can't fluke a win here, you can't cheese it. You have to get good with what you have on hand, and that's what makes her so compelling to me to fight. Or maybe you just call it quits because the game is legitimately asking so much of the player. I would not blame you, I did the same with Absolute Radiance in Hollow Knight. Hardest boss, by far, a deserving #1 finish. And that's my community's list. Do you guys agree with this Silksong difficulty ranking? Let me know down below, and be sure to parry that subscribe button so you can stay up to date on all of my future videos. Again, 800 likes and I will do a Hollow Knight difficulty boss ranking for the community. I think it could be a lot of fun. If you guys want to support the channel, there are channel memberships. Shout out to my channel members. They are on screen now. $4.99 gets you early access to certain videos. Shout out in the description at the end of videos as well, and you get access to a bunch of hidden little Let's Plays. It's very fun. If you want to follow me on social media, I have Blue Sky, Discord, Twitch, or you can just follow me when I stream here on YouTube every week. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Adios.